Welcome to the office, where our door is always open. Today I'm joined by Dr. Amanda King and we'll be discussing sickness. I know that there are genuine cases where persons abuse sick leave, but there are also genuine cases where people are actually sick although they don't look it. So we'll be discussing some of the conditions that can contribute to that and how we can provide support in the workplace. So don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.
The Office is brought to you by Renwick & Company Limited, Multi-Graphics powered by Expert Group and the Goddard Catering Group.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. As I mentioned before the break, I'm joined by Dr. Amanda King, who is a medical doctor who completed her medical degree at the
Because they don't.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Joining me today is Dr. Amanda King. And before the break, Dr. King mentioned the psychological conditions that we need to be mindful of, like depression and anxiety. And so I want to continue the conversation around that. Mm-hmm. So, Dr. King, I know that lately we've been hearing a lot more about depression than we've heard in the past. Is it a situation where we always had these conditions and we were just not aware? Because, you know, before I think there was this stigma that the person probably was possessed or something, somebody did something to somebody, you know, so mental illness was mistaken for other things. Is that the case, or is it that we are really seeing an increase right now?
I suspect it's not just the awareness, but that we are becoming more likely to talk about it. You know, there are celebrities now who talk about it, and that helps.
Yeah.
There are footballers, you know, male footballers who now say that they were depressed. Remember the cricketer? Remember when we had ICC, the English cricketer? He was depressed, and and they've started talking about it. So I think, all over the world, and we're global, so we're seeing these things, and we're seeing that maybe we can talk about it. Right. So I think that is the main thing. People are more willing to do that. There's a lot more empowerment being spoken about. There are more people doing life coaching and doing shows, even locally, people who...
I guess generally people are a little more open.
I think people are more open. You may find that maybe people are more stressed. Maybe there are more stressors that are causing people to become... Or, it's often that our expectations are too high.
Yeah.
And we want too much, actually. And so we cannot meet those expectations of ourselves, what we think we should be achieving, whether it's monetarily or otherwise. And it depresses us because we're seeing too much on Facebook and everything else and we feel people are looking so happy. Yeah. That's the other thing. I apparently with young people especially, they're seeing all these happy faces because people only post happy things.
Yes, exactly.
They don't only post happy things, but that's what people, you may see and you think, wow, that person is so lucky. They're so happy.
You create this perception of that the lifestyle that the person has.
Right. So before in the past it would have been glossy magazines and it would be slim people, and that's what people were worried about. Are you going to emulate that? Now it's emulating these happy people with all their fancy makeup and all their clothes, and we can't be necessarily like that. But actually these people, that's for show.
Exactly. And so most of them are breasts.
Right. And that's why they're taking time to be on so much on Facebook and so on. So, we have to think about it and really empower ourselves and realize that we are good enough just as we are, and we need that support system around us to help us with that as well. But stop comparing ourselves to other people.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest issue, the comparison. We live in a society of comparison, so we are constantly comparing ourselves to the other person, and that I think contributes to, in large part to where we are now, as a society, unfortunately. But let's talk a little bit more about some of the symptoms of these conditions that we need to be mindful of. So I'm not sure if you want to categorize them, to at least help our viewers understand. When somebody says that they're sick and they don't necessarily look sick, what are some of the things that they may be going through that you would not see or you wouldn't know?
Well, okay, if somebody, for example, with lupus or fibromyalgia, they have chronic pain, they're tired, right? It can become a vicious cycle, especially if they are not being positive self-managers, which is what I want to talk about soon, how we can help them. Then you find they feel nobody understands them, they're frustrated, they're worried about the future, they're worried about their finances, how to make ends meet at the end of the month. So all these things make them more stressed, maybe depressed, right? Their relationship with their partner, with their friends, their family can deteriorate because they also feel too tired to make the effort to do the things they used to do in those relationships. And sometimes the people around them don't understand why, and they, so they then feel even worse because people are not understanding them. Then they find they cannot sleep because they have pain, they're anxious, so they're worrying all night and they're depressed. So depression, you tend to wake up early in the morning and you can't go back to sleep. So then that leads to more irritability, more fatigue, more pain and tense muscles, and it goes around in a cycle. Yeah. And we have to learn to break that cycle. So, okay, so what was your question?
Some of the symptoms that, or what they may be going through that we don't necessarily see or understand.
Right. So you don't necessarily see any of that, but they're going through all of that and they may have difficulty then doing their job well, and they may snap at you. And you have to realize that if somebody is irritable or negative towards you, it's not you,
Right.
it's them,
Yeah.
unless you actually did, you know, you
Yeah,
caused
did
it.
something,
But
yeah.
right, but you know, so actually they need help, and that's where it's good to maybe actually, rather than react badly to them because they offended you, maybe try and think, okay, something
Why
is
that
wrong.
reaction? Yeah.
Maybe I can reach out to that person, you know, give them a smile, offer them a cup of tea, say, you want to go, you know, or something. See what they need,
Yeah.
and try and help them. And actually, that might open a door to where they might start talking about their problems and getting some help.
Yeah. Now, having said that, do you think that persons who have chronic conditions, do you think they should at least inform their employer or somebody, you know, at work?
Yes.
Because
well,
there's this, you know, some people may say, well, I don't want anybody to know.
Yes.
But do you think it's advisable that they at least let somebody at the workplace know?
Right. It's advisable to let somebody at the workplace know. I know there are some employers, and again, it comes down to relationships. The better the relationship between employer and employee, and between employees, the better the workplace situation, the more productivity you're going to get, right? So it would be good for us to all try and be understanding, realize that we all have illnesses. None of us is immune, right? If we go by the WHO definition of health, which is not just the absence of disease or infirmity, but the presence of complete physical, emotional, and social well-being. And sometimes you can add spiritual to that.
Right.
None of us
Nobody fits that
nobody's
category.
healthy. We're all human, and
Yes.
we're all imperfect, right?
Yeah.
So we all have challenges, and we sometimes don't like to face that, but we all do. And so I think, you know, in the workplace, yes, it would be fantastic, but there are people who feel that the employer would not understand, and it might be true, that the
Yeah.
employer, if they felt that you had a chronic illness, they may not be happy with continuing to employ you, especially if you have sick days, and they worry that maybe you're not going to be able to perform and that kind of thing. In fact, people, there was so much stigma attached to people having lupus, for example, in the past, and I know employers had difficulty employing people with lupus. And so it's something I've looked at for a long time, and I've thought, actually, a lot of the people I know with lupus are some of the best employees that I know, the most driven people.
That's right.
You know, because they will work hard when they can. They understand that when they can't,
To make up for when
yes,
they can't,
yes,
Yeah.
and they will perform for you. A lot of them. I mean, I can't speak for
Yes,
everybody because
yes.
everybody's different, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to get out of a person who has a chronic illness. You're not going to get maybe more than out of somebody who is
Yeah.
very healthy but just can't be bothered, or
Yeah.
whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So it's always good to tell somebody, especially if you know something might happen to you on the job, and you need somebody to respond to that. Like let's say you're diabetic and you're on insulin, and you know something
Yeah,
could happen
something
to you with that, or
happens.
you're epileptic and you may have a seizure. It's
Somebody
good to
needs
let
to
people,
know how
yeah, it
to
would be good-
respond to that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So it would be good to let people know, and that's where we need to look at improving the relationships within the workplace.
Okay, we have to take a break now. When we come back, we will be talking more about how we can assist persons with these conditions in the workplace, and also Dr. King is going to share with us how the individuals themselves can take better care of themselves. Okay, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for staying with us here at the office. Joining me is Dr. Amanda King, and we are talking about sickness and the fact that it is not always visible. It is sometimes very silent, and we have absolutely no clue what persons are going through in the workplace. So before the break, we were talking about the need for us to tell, well, at least the persons who have these chronic conditions, to at least communicate to somebody within the office that, you know, they have this condition, or these are the things that they can possibly expect. So like you mentioned before, if you have an epileptic seizure, how do your colleagues respond to that? Because that could be very scary in itself, and you know, employees, your colleagues, your manager may not know how to respond. So it's always advisable to at least share that information with somebody else so they know how to respond in a situation that may arise.
Yes.
So Dr. King, In terms of the self-care, I know you are passionate about that. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about what are some of the things that persons who have these conditions can do, and how can their colleagues and other persons who work with them on a daily basis, how can they support them as well throughout that journey?
Okay, so you want to be as healthy as possible. So as we said a while ago, that is mind and body, okay? It's not, so it's important to eat healthily, have a kitchen garden, ideally. we all say we don't have time, whatever, but the more natural foods, the better, okay? And it's less expensive if you start growing some of your own without pesticides and so on. So eating healthily, eating on time. A lot of people don't eat breakfast. It's actually really important to eat some breakfast to give you energy throughout the day. So this is advice for anybody, but it also is the same for somebody with a chronic illness, right? So eating on time, not eating too late, avoiding smoking and
excessive drinking.
Excessive drinking. You can still drink a little something, but well, it depends on the person, but you know, that's okay. Then exercise is really important, and you don't have to overdo it. You do, again, don't compare yourself to anybody else. You start where you are, and if you can do 2 minutes of exercise, because there are people who can only do 2 minutes of exercise, that's what you do. And there are so many ways to do exercise, so you can get advice on that. But it's important to get your little bit of stretching. You can go online and get free things. There's fitnessblender.com, which gives you good, you know, there's so many things. But okay, so you must exercise, okay, to be healthy. Even if you're skinny, people think they're skinny, they don't need to exercise because they lose weight. That's not true. You need to exercise. You need to get enough sleep, right? Sleep is so important. And a lot of people are losing sleep because they say they have so much to do. But in fact, we waste a lot of time. So be more disciplined with your time, right? So that you can get your sleep, because sleep is so important. People say they cannot lose weight, and you find that they're hardly sleeping. And that, if you don't sleep, you will put on weight, right? If you don't eat on time, you'll put on weight, things like that. So these are important as basic, you know, we're a machine that we need to oil, and that is part of the oiling. But we also have a mind, we're more complex than that, and we need to be positive, right? So if we keep feeding ourselves negative thoughts and saying we can't do this and we can't do that, and so we will never feel better, we'll never get better. So, but some of us can do that more easily than others, right? But a lot of us need help. And so that's why with the Arthritis and Lupus Association, we brought to St. Lucia Stanford University's self-management program. At first we did the arthritis self-management, and then we realized we're a small country, why not let everybody benefit and do the chronic disease self-management program, which everybody can do. And that is really an empowerment program, and it is, it's been studied well, it's the best one internationally, and it is, what it does, it increases self-efficacy, which is your belief that you can make a positive difference in your own life. And it's the process that's important. It's a 6-week program. If you join the association for $30 for the year, it's free. And we have 2 trainers. I'm one of the leaders. We do it voluntarily, so there's no pay for the leaders. It's like 2 hours, 2.5 hours a week for 6 weeks. And we do it all through the island. We were the first in the Caribbean and Latin America to bring it to our people. But in fact, PAHO then did realized how good it was, and they brought it to the islands and to Latin America a couple of years ago. And so the ministry now is doing it, unfortunately doing it in parallel rather than in combination. Because I think, you know, we're a country that sometimes does that. So what we need to learn actually is how to work together so that we can do more for everybody rather than separate. But yes.
That is so true.
Yes.
Yeah. But where you said you do it throughout the country?
So we actually did it through the Ministry of Health. So we have nurses trained. In fact, our most active places are in Monrepo and in Babonneau. Oh, really? Yes. They do the most. Where in Babonneau? Where in like Babonneau Health Center does it, different places. In Monrepo, we had an all men's group once. That's now about 2 years ago, I think, and they called themselves Vive Bien Nom Mopo #1. And they were so impressive. And from that, they started beekeeping together. People actually really love the program, and it really does help them.
Well, that's great to have an all-men group, because, you know, men usually don't do these things, right?
So that was fantastic. But it's a program that I'd like people to know about, because unfortunately we have not done enough PR
Right.
for it. And it's the most cost-effective program you could ever do, and it actually has cost us over like maybe $100,000 to get this program to where it is today.
Wow.
Through fundraising and so on, because
Yeah.
we so believe in the program, we will not let it die.
Yeah.
But we need to now do more with letting people know, because they should know, but we haven't. And we do it all over the island.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've had many success stories coming out of
Oh
that.
yes, and the testimonials are, and that's what makes it. And that's the thing about volunteering as well. You gain so much from giving.
Yeah.
It's just, you don't need any other reward other than somebody feeling good.
Yeah.
And I actually had a patient this week who I met her 7 weeks ago, and I said to her about she had pain, and we were talking, and I was getting all her history, and she spoke about, I said, do you think stress had anything to do with this? And she said, well, I've been stressed all my life, right? But she didn't want to go into anything. And I said, okay, you want to do the self-management program, the VBA program? And she said, yeah, sure, she'll do it. She did it, and then I saw her this week, and she said, having spoken to me in the first place, and when I asked her, she didn't tell me everything because it was the first encounter. But having done the program, she realized a lot about what was really bothering her.
Right.
And she was able then to speak to me about it. And of course, that's just the first step, where she understands she does need to really speak to somebody professional about it to be able to cope better with it, because that is what is manifesting itself now as so much pain.
Okay, Dr. King, we are actually out of time. I would like to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here. I think you've shared some very valuable information with our viewers, and I'm hoping that our viewers found this information to be empowering, especially for those who are dealing with chronic diseases in the workplace. And I hope that our managers and business owners will be a little more understanding and accommodating, understanding some of the things that persons may go through, even if they don't look sick. It's not always that they aren't. Like I said at the beginning, I know we have some cases where persons do abuse sick leave, but having said that, there are some really genuine cases where persons are sick and need the support of their colleagues. After all, we spend most of our time at the office. All right, so until next time, follow us on social media. Keep up to date with what's happening here. Share your comments and suggestions. Give us ideas as to any topics that you would like us to discuss here at the office.